Welcome to this session on Failing Forward. My name's Dan Gallagher, and in this session I want to take the time to look a little bit more at how your attitude reflects in whether your experience of failing forward. In the previous session I used a formula, C plus P equals E. Circumstance plus perspective equals your experience. And your perspective can be defined or looked at in many ways as your attitude. It's our attitude which will affect the outcome of numerous situations. In fact, consider, is your attitude that the glass is half full or half empty? What is your attitude when you enter into a situation? Because that attitude will affect your perspective. For instance, let me give you the example. I was thinking the other day about how my wife and I went to the very same movie, and we walked out with two completely different experiences. Why? Because she was focusing on one aspect of the movie which developed a negative experience for her, whereas I was focusing on a completely different element of that movie, a different aspect of it. Our perspectives were completely different, yet the circumstance was identical. We both sat and watched the exact same movie. Your perspective determines your experience. And when we say perspective, we're really talking a lot of times about your attitude. How are you approaching something? And again, are you looking at something as half full or half empty? We can determine to a large degree if we're going to have a negative attitude or a positive attitude, because attitude is your choice. But it's easier said than done to say, well, just change your attitude. How do you go about changing your attitude? You know, sometimes I've been in such a deep hole in life or been so despondent or depressed, I don't know how to get myself out of there. The other day when I was talking to a friend of mine, Mike, he mentioned to me, he said, you know, a lot of times it's what you're focusing on. And I think that's exactly right, just like that example of the movie. What was my wife focusing on versus what was I focusing on? When it comes to focus, there's a number of ways in which you can adjust your focus. One thing I like to do, though, is I like to promote that you live in reality. What really is the situation? Many times we allow our minds to roll forward with all the what-if scenarios. Something negative happens, and then you immediately go, oh my gosh, I've lost my job. So then you begin to develop all the other negative scenarios. The fact is, you're living in the future, whereas your focus needs to be on where you are right now. The other day I was watching an interview of a gentleman. They were having, a lot of people had lost their jobs, and they had a job fair. And the gentleman comes in, and the interviewer's got him on the camera, and it's like, oh my gosh, what is your life like that you've lost your job? And they were really building up a lot of the negativity of this. The fellow looked right at her and he said, you know what? I don't have cancer. I love that. What a great expression. You know, the fact is, yes, he had lost his job. Was life perfect? Absolutely not. Nobody's life is ever perfect. But the man was living with such a positive attitude. He expressed it in the form of saying, I don't have cancer. You know, life could be a lot worse. I remember in situations where I've had negative things happen to my children. But the fact is, my children are still alive. I can choose to rejoice in that, or I can choose to focus on the negative aspect of it. Live in reality. Learn to live in what really is the case right now. Is the glass half full or is the glass half empty? The fact is, the circumstance is the same. The water level is sitting right where it's at, and you get to decide if you're going to view it as half full or half empty. I'm not talking about Pollyanna living, painting the world with a perfect brush and making everything perfect. I'm just saying is learn to condition your thinking to look at life as it really is. Someone once said, if you're still breathing, then the fact is life's pretty good. And my dad once expressed to me where he was working at trying to help out with some guys in some rest homes or retirement homes. And there was a gentleman there that was a paraplegic. He had lost his legs. He was bound to the wheelchair. And my dad looked at him and said, oh my gosh, that's so terrible that you're a paraplegic. And the man looked at him and said, you know what? Thank God I'm not a quad. A quadriplegic, a person who's lost it from the neck down. This man's perspective was, at least I can use my hands. At least I'm mobile. Oh my gosh, I'd hate to be one of those quadriplegics. See, the fact is that no matter where you're at, you know, you could be focusing on negative aspects of life that you really don't even need to be living in. God tells us to think on whatever things are pure, whatever things are noble, to think on the good things in life. Sure, we can focus on the bad, and you're going to let those good things go right past you. If you want to learn to fail forward, you're going to have to learn how to live with reality thinking. You're going to have to learn how to accept the things that you have, recognizing that things can get better, yes, and things could get worse. But the fact is, rejoice in the way that they are. Another point that I'd like to make is also learn to look forward, not look back. The fact is that in this time and right now, this is only where I am. I could turn and focus all about everything that's happened to me in life, but there's nothing I can do that I can change about it. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, and if I focused on every one of my mistakes, I probably would get nowhere. But if I look towards the future, if I look towards what can be, then I have the opportunity to make changes. There's an acronym that I learned one time, which is KWINK, knowing what I now know. That if you could learn to live with an acronym, KWINK, it can change your life. A lot of times people make a decision and then the decision turns out wrong. It turns out that it was a mistake. So then they beat themselves up over that mistake. But the fact is, you didn't know that it was going to be a mistake until you made the decision and then reached that point. But knowing what you now know, make another decision and move forward. That's a great key for turning mistakes or failures into stepping stones into success. See, develop that attitude. If you can learn to recognize that I don't like these circumstances, but I didn't know that I wasn't going to like this, and I didn't know I was going to be here till I made that decision that got me here. But now that I know I'm here, let's move forward. People that are always looking back, always second-guessing themselves, usually tend to have bad attitudes. And I'm not saying not to look at the past. Absolutely look at the past. But look at the past from the perspective that you're going to learn from those mistakes. Sometimes you make a decision and then that decision's bad, so I've been with people and they want to beat you up over it. Don't allow that. Knowing what you know now, make a new decision and move forward. Philippians 3, chapter 13 through 14 says, "Brothers, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it. But one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. I forget those things which are behind, and I strain towards what is the future." If you want to be able to learn how to fail forward, learn how to adjust your attitude, look at what you're focusing on. See the glass for what it really is. When you make a mistake, knowing what you now know, make a new decision and change that mistake. And don't be a person who's living in the past. Look towards the future and press towards it. If you can change your attitude, you will learn to fail forward.